Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the changes from the point of view of building safety, fire safety that have come in over the last few years, and what that's meaning in terms of planning decisions and planning processes with high-rise residential developments, which is a particular feature in Ilford. So yeah, if you want to pop on the next slide, thank you, Alex. So the new fire safety regime, I expect people know quite a lot about this already. Of course, it's 7 years almost to the day from the Grenfell Tower fire, and the final inquiry report is due out, I think, in September this year. But clearly, multiple failings were identified in that building and across the industry in terms of fire safety. So there's been a lot of work done. There's been the new legislation, the new building safety regulator established as part of the Health and Safety Executive, and then specifically around fire safety and fire escape, there's been new guidance from the government through approved document B changes, which is part of all the building regulations. And there's a lot in there, but the essence of it is that there's a second staircase as a means of escape needed on new blocks over 18 meters high. Now, that's been known about for quite some time, but the detailed guidance hasn't been out for quite a while, and so there's been quite a lot of uncertainty, and there's a whole issue about transitional arrangements where a developer might have already got planning permission. They're able to build out a scheme without that second staircase within a certain period, so 30-month period for that transition. And in London specifically, the Greater London Authority, the GLA, have been requiring those second staircases as part of their approach in planning terms ahead of the changes to the approved document, and that has created some uncertainty and some confusion, and there's been delays on a number of big schemes where developers didn't want to go ahead until there was clarity about that new guidance. So there's been a significant impact on a number of schemes, and obviously in London there are a lot of high-rise residential schemes, and that's where a lot of the numbers are in terms of housing delivery. So it's had a really bad impact over the last year or so on progress with some of those schemes through planning. What it is meaning essentially, and I'll come on to some of the detail around this, is that schemes are needing to be redesigned. So the building layouts need to change. So here's an example. So in the centre of Ilford, there's an old Sainsbury's store. It's one of those big stores, single story. This is right next to an Elizabeth line station and the centre of town. So this is an area where you've got the potential for significant building height. And so a housing developer has come along and done a deal with the owners of the site to re-provide a smaller Sainsbury's store as part of a mixed-use development with a whole range of different residential elements there. You've got build to rent, you've got student accommodation, you've got affordable housing. They brought forward the scheme that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there. That secured planning consent. Then these new rules came out about second staircase, and the whole thing had to be looked at again and redesigned. And the scheme on the right-hand side is now the scheme that's come through and just earlier this year been granted a further planning approval. So that's meant they've had to introduce those second staircases. They've had to make some other changes around parking bays and so on, and because that's to do with EV charging and fire safety aspects of that. And essentially they've had to go higher on some of the blocks in order to make the scheme viable, in order to get that level of additional sellable units, basically rentable units, that covers the financials on all of that additional space needed for the second staircases and the other parking arrangements. So yeah, a really difficult reappraisal, redesign process for them as a developer. And and the scheme is still, I think in terms of viability, quite tight. And so that's that example. Next one is down in Goodmayes, which is another Elizabeth Line station. We've got 4 of them in the Redbridge Borough. So these are areas that have suddenly become so well connected into central London. And this site, again, it's a supermarket site, Tesco store. Again, they're going to re-provide the store with a significant amount of housing, whereas at the moment it's just a single-storey supermarket site. This one's had an even harder journey through the process because there's been a whole series of attempts to judicially review the scheme by some local activists. Those judicial reviews have all failed, but it's delayed getting on site and delivering this scheme. And frankly, if that hadn't happened, the scheme would probably be being built out without the issues around fire safety having required a redesign. But now, because of those delays, it is going through that redesign process. And so second staircases, all the other fire safety requirements are being built in. And so this one isn't quite so advanced as the one in Ilford. This one, they're in pre-application discussions with the council's planning team and with the GLA. And again, there's real challenges here around viability. So this scheme was going to deliver 35% affordable housing. And with all these additional costs around fire safety and building safety, there's a real challenge around that. And we'll wait to see how that goes through the planning process. But obviously they'll be looking to, as much as possible, take it through a set of amendments rather than a completely new planning application. But it's going to be challenging, I think, this one. So that's that example. And then the next example is a scheme that's much smaller in scale, which is owned by the council. So that picture you can see there is an old council office building. We've downsized and don't need as much office space. So that building and one that mirrored it on the other side of the road have both been demolished. We were going to develop those out with the council leading as developer, but they're very tight sites, and working out how to bring those up to the right height with a second staircase with the right number of homes to make that viable has again been very, very challenging. And the council at this point is looking to explore disposal of those sites to other developers rather than pursuing it in the council's own programme, which is predominantly also to do with the fact that the council's own financial position means we're less willing to take the risk of borrowing significant amounts of money to invest in a new build scheme that may be difficult in terms of viability. So that's a real whiz through some examples from Redbridge, and really just to summarise, the redesign is the thing that's having to go on to deal with fire safety, to improve the fire safety, which we all, I'm sure, support that improvement in fire safety and those outcomes for our residents. But it does increase the cost of building those schemes. It does mean some loss of residential space in many cases. It does impact on things like parking and external space. And so it's not a simple thing to just redesign it and put in a staircase. There's all these other impacts that need to be taken into account. And getting the viability to work economically, commercially, is a challenge. So that may require increased heights of buildings or a revised mix of the sizes, the bed sizes of the different residential homes. It may impact on the percentage of affordable housing in order to make that scheme deliverable. And so it requires a lot of creative thinking by architects and developers, and more flexibility in terms of planning negotiations. And it's a particular challenge for the affordable housing sector because grant rates are already stretched to the limit. How are they going to find the additional cost, to cover those additional costs? How are they going to finance that? And I mean, the final point there, which isn't really what this talks about, but there's there's really a trend going on, certainly in London, where registered providers, housing associations, are pulling out of those private-led Section 106 deals to focus on their own land-led schemes rather than buying Section 106 homes through development agreements, through agreement with private developers. And you know, I understand commercially why they're doing that, but in terms of delivery of key schemes like these town centre schemes, which typically are led by the private sector, then it's really undermining again the delivery in the market at the moment, because those registered providers are reducing their development aspirations, and they're focusing on the schemes they can control and deliver themselves. And you know, someone needs to provide that affordable housing within those private-led developments. So I'm really happy to take questions, and interested to hear other people's views.